Predict, pick, and prevail in your fantasy football leagues with Nick Giacobbe and Nick Cap. From breakouts to busts, superstars to sleepers, these are the guys that will help you achieve fantasy glory. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast.
Welcome, everybody. We are going into Week 14, the last week of the regular season, and welcome to the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast, where we give you our predictions, our picks, with the hopes that we hope we prevail through Week 14 and get you in the playoffs and the rest of the 2023 fantasy football season. I'm your host, Nick Giacobbe. Joining me is Nick Cap. Alrighty, Nick, how are we feeling? It's crunch time. I'm feeling terrible, but it's crunch time. Crunch time.
Yeah. As a behind the scenes thing, Nick, me, and two others from our league have been texting for the last hour on and off about our fantasy league that all four of us are a part of, and it's been a fun conversation. I mean, it's a very tight race. 6 teams make it. 7 teams are 7 and 6 or greater. Nick needs a win. He needs one of 3 people to lose, and he's in. Loss and Nick is the outlier team who's in the top 3 or 4 in points scored.
I'd be 3. I don't think I dropped to 4, and I could be back at 2 and still not make the playoffs.
Yeah, so it's a very, very tight race. Very good. It's a very good league. It's very competitive, but yeah, it's just been fun conversations from all of us.
Well, the thing is that's frustrating is that I'm in the same position I was in 2 seasons ago. So not last season, the year before. I was coming off my one seed and points winning season. And now it's 2 years ago. I'm number 2 in points heading into week 14, and I'm the 7th seed and need to squeak into the playoffs. I did end up squeaking in and getting bounced in the first round, but I also ended up winning the points. So now I'm in the same situation as I was in 2 years ago. And why I get frustrated about the luck of fantasy football, but then I'm in another league, in my dynasty league, where luck's not been on my side, and I'm the 7th seed looking in at the moment, and I probably shouldn't be in. Jonathan Taylor's on my dynasty team, and he's been out with injuries a couple times this season. Just lost Tank Dell, lost Joe Burrow. This is the league I traded Tyreek Hill in, so I probably shouldn't be in the playoffs in that league, but I do technically have a shot at that one as well. So we'll see. Not happy about it, but that's how it kind of goes in fantasy sometimes. So we'll talk about it and try to help you guys out. And it is week 14. So we're going to start the show off with a waiver wire segment, giving you some waiver wire options to help you out in week 14 to maybe get you in the playoffs if you need to, like me, or maybe some guys you can kind of stash for the rest of the playoffs for your championship run. Then we're going to go into a week 13 recap, recap every single game within week 13. So without further ado, I'm going to give you guys some plugs. We're also live at 10 o'clock Eastern time. We never really do weekday morning shows. Me and Nick's work schedule, we're both working a little bit later today. So we're doing a morning show. And if you are joining us live, you can ask us questions. If not, you listen to the replay on YouTube or on our audio streaming platforms, and I'll give you those plugs right now. So if this is the first time you're listening to us, thank you so much. Do the show every single week, plus a live show on Sundays. The weekly shows that we do are normally Tuesdays at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. That show is live on our YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. YouTube and Facebook is PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. Twitter is PrimeTimeFFPod. The show is then uploaded on our audio streaming platforms the next day on all audio streaming platforms: iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcast, and Anchor. If you're on iTunes or Spotify, please give us a 5-star rating and a review. We really would appreciate that from you guys. If you'd rather watch and listen to the show, whether it's live or the replay, YouTube again is PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. We do a live show Sunday mornings as well. That is 9 o'clock Eastern time to answer all of your questions right before kickoff starts. Sit, who's injured, give you a preview for each game. We really enjoy doing that show. It's a lot of fun. So that show is available live, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter as well. If you are going to our YouTube channel at all, make sure to subscribe, hit the little bell icon to get notifications every time we are live. Leave a like on every video that you do watch. You can also connect with us and interact with us on social media. PrimeTime FFPod, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube is PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. So without further ado, waiver wire week 14. Couple injuries this week that might affect your waiver wire. A couple injuries that won't. But yeah, let's kind of talk about it. So Nick, first, we do go position by position. I like to give you some names, and as I guess the analyst of the show, I let you kind of talk about it. So let's look some names for quarterback. And I guess we could kind of look at just this week's matchups alone in case you do need a quarterback. So some names here. We have Josh Dobbs for the Vikings. And I'm trying to think, did any quarterback get injured this week?
Trevor Lawrence.
Trevor Lawrence will be out. Yeah, he does have an ankle sprain, so he won't be playing next week. Might be up for the entirety of your playoffs. So Josh Dobbs for the Vikings. He is playing.
He has one of the easiest playoff schedules from the waiver wire.
He has the Raiders. So he has the Raiders this week. Then we have Gardner Minshew for the Colts. He has the Bengals this week. Will Levis for the Titans. He has the Dolphins this week. And I'll give one more. Jake Browning has the Colts this week. So, Nick, how would you kind of rank these quarterbacks, maybe if it's this week or the entirety of the playoffs?
For this week, there's two guys I like. It's Josh Dobbs, and it would be Jameis Winston. We know the upside of Winston on any week basis. He's a guy that can go get you 3 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns. The offense has a lot of talented skill players between Kamara. You do worry a little bit about Taysom Hill getting some reps. And then obviously Olave, they got some speed guys on the outside. So the offense is very solid there. I would expect Jameis to be a good 1 week play if you need him. But for the totality, I think Josh Dobbs has to be the number 1 waiver claim. He's only owned in 45% of leagues. So it's worth the roster spot. His playoff schedule is very, very easy. I have Trevor Lawrence in a league, and my backup is Kyler Murray, who's on bye this week. So I'm hoping to land Dobbs where I could start him immediately for the hopefully 1 week, maybe rest of the season rental. I think he's clearly the one from the group.
Okay, I'll agree with you on that. So moving on to running backs here. This is where things are kind of interesting. So we have Ezekiel Elliott as your number 1 waiver, probably the number 1 waiver claim of the week, I'd say, with what's his name? Stevenson, Roger Stevenson. It's going to be out probably for the rest of your fantasy playoffs, I think. It's a high ankle sprain. He's probably out 3-4 weeks. We'll talk about that later on in the show. But that's a big waiver claim. Then we have Tajay Spears, who Derrick Henry, I think, already cleared concussion protocol. So, again, the rest of these guys just backup running backs at this point that you may want to stash. Roschon Johnson for the Bears, Elijah Mitchell. I've been saying him for the past few weeks. Is there anybody really prioritizing besides Ezekiel Elliott?
No, not really. I mean, it would be Tajay number 2. Even though Henry did clear concussion protocol, he's still working towards being able to play. I expect that Derrick Henry's out there. I expect that he's totally fine. But in the off chance, Tajay Spears is going to be a bell cow if Derrick Henry does miss any time. And Derrick Henry has the easiest playoff schedule because it's his division, and he absolutely steamrolls his division.
He does.
Playoffs.
All right, for wide receivers, Elijah Moore. I think he had a pretty good game this week. I don't have the number in front of me, but I also just realized I've not been reading out the percents owned in these leagues. All these players are owned in 50% of leagues or less. So Elijah Moore owned in 38% of leagues. Noah Brown for the Texans owned in 37% of leagues. Odell Beckham owned in 44% of leagues. So those are the top 3 that I'm seeing here. There's some other guys here: Demario Douglas, Khalil Shakir. So who are some wide receivers you might be prioritizing? I think Elijah Moore and Noah Brown for sure. But after that, is there maybe anybody else? I know you love your Joshua Palmer. I just don't know when he's actually returning.
I don't think he's going to make a return this season. I saw some reports that he could, but I don't see them bringing him back in for the rest of the year. I would love to see him there. If you have an IR spot, it's a no-brainer that you should already have him and throw him on the IR because that offense is so explosive, and he would immediately plug back into the wide receiver 2 spot. I still love Jameson Williams. He's still owned in less than 20% of leagues. And he's starting to get a significant bump up in snap share and usage. So I would expect that for your fantasy playoffs. If you have one flex spot, you need the upside. He is a guy that can go score you the deep touchdown. He's kind of your Hail Mary prayer. But I agree with Nick. I think Elijah Moore is the one for me. The last 4 weeks, 7, 7, 9, and 12 in the target column. 3 of the last 4 weeks over 12 fantasy points. So he's putting up the numbers. He's getting the workload that you'd want from a wide receiver in your starting lineup. And then the number 2 for me is Noah Brown. The Texans have been so explosive. Nico Collins is clearly solidified himself as the 2 behind Dell, but Dell is out for the rest of the year now. And Noah Brown has shown very good signs of life throughout the season. He got dinged up a few times, but when he's been out there, he's been very consistent and very good for your lineup. So for me, I'm willing to put a claim in him, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's starting for you at some point in your playoffs.
Yep, Nick nailed it. All right, tight ends. Kate Otten, who I think had a goose egg this week, owned in 41% of leagues. Isaiah Likely, 29% of leagues. Gerald Everett owned in 32% of leagues. I don't see him here, but I've picked up Zach Ertz in 2 leagues that I lost Mark Andrews in. And I'm intrigued. If he does sign this week, I think he could. He's going to have to learn the playbook, but especially if he goes to like the Eagles, who Dallas Goedert is still banged up. I'm intrigued, but I think he should be on this list as well. Maybe as a deeper stash. But who do you kind of like out of this bunch? If maybe you need to play maybe this is more like
you need it this week.
Yeah, so maybe let's go with this week. So Kate Otten has the Falcons. Isaiah Likely has the Rams, and Gerald Everett has the Broncos. So how do you rank them? Who do you prefer? Is there anybody else maybe I'm not mentioning?
I like Likely the most, clearly, coming off the bye. Last week, the week before the bye, looked pretty good, was out there for a significant snap share. It seems like if they don't bring in Ertz, Likely is going to be their guy, with no questions asked. So you're getting the snap share. He's replacing one of the top tight ends in the league for the rest of the season. It's on one of the more explosive offenses. So it checks a lot of boxes. It checks a lot of boxes for your tight end position, which has been very lackluster this year, as it has been every year. So I think Likely's clearly the one for me. Then it's a toss-up between Otten and Everett. I would not want to play either of them. If you need one, the Broncos matchup for Everett is definitely significantly better than Otten's matchup. So I would go with Everett and prey on the high upside. He'll probably be one of the bigger red zone threats for his team, where it's going to only be Mike Evans for the Buccaneers. So the touchdown upside for Everett is probably significantly higher.
Okay. I'd rather play a high-powered offense team like Everett or Likely as well. All right. For your defense, we're looking at the Saints defense. They have the Panthers this week. I know that off the back, so I picked them up a week ago. And the Packers, they are playing the Giants, and the Colts are playing, I believe, the Bengals. Yep. And the Texans are playing the Jets. And what do you think? I'm personally playing the Saints and the Texans in leagues. I don't know. Jake Browning looked pretty good last night. I'm not saying he's like a top 10 quarterback, but I'm not sure that I would trust the Colts defense against Jake Browning. I think I personally have that one out.
I'm going to take a look at something real quick because I did all my waiver claims this morning, obviously. And the Packers defense was the one I wanted for the rest of the year. Between Giants, Tampa, Carolina, Minnesota, those are 4 of the worst scoring defenses on the year. The other team I did want for the rest of the year was Indy. The Colts defense over the last 4 weeks in normal fantasy scoring systems, they're averaging their last 4 games are 27, 13, 12, and 17. That's difference making for your defensive position. Over that span, they have 3 touchdowns. They're averaging over 5 sacks a game. They have 3 fumbles forced, about 2 interceptions per game, and are only allowing 16 points per game. That Colts defense is scary good, and they're going to go Cincinnati, which I agree with Nick. I think Browning's a tough matchup, but it's a short week for a very solid defense. Then you go Pittsburgh, whose offense has been abysmal, at Atlanta and Las Vegas. So one of the easier schedules. If you need the 1-week rental, it has to be the New Orleans Saints. They've been one of the best defenses in football, and they're going up against the worst offense in football. And then the number 2, like Nick said, is the Texans going up against the Jets. Those are 2 of the most favorable matchups. So the 1-week rental, it's Saints and Texans. The rest of the season, if you're locked into your playoffs, it does not matter what happens. Packers and Colts are the 2 that you have to pick up.
Okay. I also want to note here, and not the crap on Nick the Jets, but like the Falcons defense had a 20-point game against the Jets last week. If you could go and look at the Jets schedule and just pick up the defenses that are playing the Jets, that might be, your best bet unless Rodgers really wants to prove a point to step on the field, which knowing him is possible, but we'll see. All right. I think we got some questions in here. Cool. My boy, John, would you guys maybe help me today? Help who to start next week? I have a huge matchup. I know you're busy Sunday. Yeah, we could definitely help you out. Definitely drop some questions in here and we'll let you know. From Joe, should I start Madison against Vegas or Warren against New England? Have to make a decision by Thursday. It's tough. I mean, I think it's one with a better matchup, but I mean, I don't know. What are you thinking on this one?
I would probably lean on the side of Madison. It does worry me that Najee appears to be more of the RB1 for the Steelers, and they're most likely, if not already, going to be out. Pickett was another injury this week. So that does scare me. I would expect Pittsburgh and New England to have one of the lower scoring games on the week, where Madison and Vegas could have a shootout, both teams coming off a bye. Justin Jefferson returns to the lineup. You're going to see the Vikings push the ball downfield a little bit more. I think Madison has the better matchup and probably gets more opportunity. Warren's definitely the more explosive player. He's going to offer you more ceiling, no question there. But I think if you want 14 points in your lineup, I think Madison's more likely to get that than Jaylen Warren is.
Yeah, my worry with Warren is that the Steelers' offense is not high-powered, and now they're facing a Patriots defense that just held the Chargers' offense to 6 points. As much as I do love ragging on Nick and the Chargers and Herbert for being a stat sheet stuffer, that's unacceptable because the Patriots' defense has not been top 5 this year. They've been very good. They've always been very good, but an offense like that, even with the injuries that they have, should not be held to 6 points. So with that, I am worried now seeing a Steelers offense led by Mitch Trubisky, and they already were not scoring a lot of points or putting up yards with Kenny Pickett, but now Mitch is leading the offense on Thursday Night Football, a short week. This is a recipe for a very, very low scoring game. This might be the lowest scoring game of the NFL season and maybe in like a long time. This is going to be a low scoring one. So yeah, I think I'd rather play Madison knowing that that game has a chance to be a high scoring game. And the Vikings are still vying for a playoff spot. I guess the Steelers technically are too, but I like playing guys that really need to play well. All right, from John, he goes, I have a deep team, 2 running back, 2 wide receiver, 2 flexes. Tony Pollard, Rashad White, DeAndre Swift, Kenneth Walker, wide receivers, Debo, Waddle, Evans, Amon-Ra, tight end, Kittle, Laporta. Don't know who I should start over who. So let's just look at this week. I'm assuming you're asking about this week or next week. Let's look at this week. Pollard, Rashad White, DeAndre Swift, Kenneth Walker. I don't think Walker's going to play this week, so we could kind of X him out at the moment. And even if he does play, I just really don't like the 49ers matchup. I'm cool playing Tony Pollard. It should be a high-scoring game, a very important game on Sunday Night Football. I think that's one to play. And I look at DeAndre Swift or Rashad White. Let's see. The Bucs have. I just read this off. The Falcons. I think I want to play Rashad White. He seems to get in the end zone almost every week at this point. He could catch a couple balls. He could get enough rushing yards to get you some points as well. I think this week I would play Tony Pollard and Rashad White. So, Nick, why don't we go position by position and let me know what you think for this week only. And, John, if you were talking about next week, let us know in the comments, and we could actually look up the matchups for next week. But we're going to look at this week just for now.
We'll go. I would go with Rashad White and Tony Pollard as well as your 1 and 2.
Cool. I like Swift. They just don't use him in the red zone, which is a problem. So
the problem is the tush push is
he did say this week. Cool.
The tush push is the reason why Swift is not going to get any goal line work because they have an alternative play to get the touchdown to Hurts. So you're not going to see Swift put up the touchdown numbers that like David Montgomery or Raheem Mostert are putting up, where they just need to punch the ball in with a less mobile, not as strong quarterback. We could pivot to wide receiver.
Cool. All right. So with receivers, he's got Debo Samuel just had an awesome game and is now facing the Seahawks. Jalen Waddle, who's going up against the Titans. Mike Evans, who's going up against the Falcons. Amon-Ra St. Brown. So Amon-Ra is definitely going to play. So there's your second run. Your first receiver. And we can talk flexes after, but let's just talk receivers right now. So I think we're both in on Amon-Ra. Now we're looking at Mike Evans, Jalen Waddle, and Debo. I think I'm personally between Evans and Debo, and I think one's going to go in the flex. I think I would give Evans a slight edge. I just think he's been on a tear. He's already hit 1,000 yards after 13 weeks. He seems to be Baker's favorite target. I think the only issue that I have playing Evans is that you're playing both Bucks, but I think Evans is too talented not to play. So I think I would lock in Amon-Ra and Evans at my wide receiver 1 and 2.
Yeah, earlier this year when Evans played Atlanta, he put up a 20-point bomb.
And these teams are competing for like a playoff spot. Like again, I like playing playing players that are competing for a playoff spot here.
Debo against Seattle put up 22. So you're looking at two very solid guys. I mean, listen,
I think I'm going to flex these two receivers no matter what.
We don't need to debate who the wide receiver 2 is. I think Amon-Ra, Evans, Debo are all locked into your line.
Are you in favor of all 4 of these guys playing with the 2 flexes? Or are you putting running back in there?
I think
if this is PPR, I always lean running back. I'm sorry, receiver.
I do like having Waddle going on Monday Night Football with your chance to win your week. I think after this week, Waddle's going to have big question marks. His playoff schedule is Jets, Cowboys, Ravens, which are 3 of the top 5 defenses in football, 3 of the best teams at limiting wide receiver points. So no need to panic now, but up against Tennessee, they have one of the worst secondaries in football. The Dolphins should have no problem routing them. So I think Waddle would be your second flex guy.
Yep. And then we are looking at tight end, Kittle or Laporta. And I really love this question because Kittle's super talented. He's the big name, and he's going against the Seahawks, who he does have a history of just thrashing. But again, there's just so much talent on that 49ers offense. Then you have Laporta, who's going up against the Bears, another really favorable matchup. And he's either going to play 2 Lions or 2 49ers. I don't know. I mean, I think I kind of want to lean Laporta just because he's like the second receiving option on that team, and Kittle feels like number 3 or 4.
Laporta last time they played had like 5 or 6 points. Same thing with Kittle. So both struggled. I would lean Kittle purely because I like the idea of him having the home field matchup versus Laporta going into Chicago. I know that's kind of like a scapegoat answer, but they've both played each other this year. Both have played this matchup prior. Both had less than 6 fantasy points, maybe less than 7. So for me, I would probably go Kittle. I think it's more likely that they pass for a touchdown than run for a touchdown, score more points versus the Lions, who are going to pound the rock. They're going to, I think that the Bears have a good shot to upset them this week. They played them very close.
That's going to be my counterpoint is I think the Niners game gets out of hand, and I think the Lions game is close, and Jared Goff may have to throw more.
Maybe, but I mean, we've seen the 49ers drop 35 points. All their fantasy players have and perform.
Yeah.
So, listen, I don't think you could really go wrong on that opinion. I think both will be fine. So go with your gut. That would be my advice for your tight end.
Yep. Cool. All right. Thank you for the question, John. I mean, I've seen John's team before. I think his record isn't like great. If I remember when he sent me it a couple of weeks ago, and I said to him, "How was your record? Not great. His team is stacked." I think that was my reaction. And that's interesting because I've had this debate with people: is what's tougher, like a 14-man league where you gotta really, scratch something off the waiver wire, or like an 8-man league, and then you're although your 8-man league teams are stacked, that means everybody's team is stacked. And you have to make the right decisions. And John's team is a 10-man. I think it's not 8. I know it's not 8. It's 10 or 12. So that's what makes it tough when you do have a really good team, and then you're kicking yourself for your flex plays and stuff like that. I have a friend who didn't lose, but he could have put up more points, which he would need in his points race, because he took Pacheco out for Tank Dell right at like 12:58 on Sunday, and it's 10-man 2-keeper for John. But this friend, I told him yesterday, I'm like, I can't fault you for that. I would have played Tank Dell as well. So, all right, we are now going to move on to our Week 13 recapping every Week 13 game. Injuries, a lot of injuries this week, unfortunately, and biggest fantasy football takeaways. So, Thursday Night Football, Seahawks at the Cowboys. I didn't love this game, especially the last quarter, because it disappointed me like they kind of always do. But Nick, what's your big fantasy football takeaway from this one?
It falls more in line with the actual football, but I'll turn it into fantasy. I think Dak is going to win the MVP if he wins this week against Philadelphia. His stats have been insane, and as it pivots to a fantasy take, in retrospect, guys like Jake Ferguson, Brandon Cooks, CeeDee Lamb, obviously CeeDee Lamb's the wide receiver 3 on the year now, which is crazy. And Tony Pollard, the last 3 weeks have all really benefited and have really come into their own role. I think Dallas is picking up. They've been on fire since the San Francisco loss, but they've been on fire for the rest of the year. I think they're picking up a lot of steam at the right time. As a real football take, I think that there's a very good shot that they make it to the Super Bowl if they can avoid San Fran in the playoffs. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think San Fran's going all the way. But I think Dallas is clearly the second best team in this conference. I think they're going to steamroll their way through Philadelphia this week, and I think you can comfortably start your guys like Brandon Cooks, Jake Ferguson, those guys that you might be debating if they're worth a start.
Okay. I mean, everybody was great in this game. CeeDee was 12 for 116 and a touchdown. Tony Pollard got in the end zone, just didn't catch enough balls to really justify the draft capital. Dak's been great, like Nick said. DK was awesome. So my 2 takeaways here are that Jake Ferguson kept pounding the desk about like another Cowboy fan we know, just pounding this desk that Jake Ferguson will be a league winner. 6 receptions, 77 yards on a touchdown. It's a 20-point fantasy game on Thursday Night Football. Watch Jackson Smith and Jigba. He might have lapped Tyler Lockett at this point in terms of snap share, talent, etc. I don't know how the next few weeks are going to go. I think Lockett's contracts or there's an out in his contract at the end of the season. So watch how these next few weeks go. He had 7 for 62. He got robbed of a touchdown. It would have been like a 30-yard touchdown. I know we play the game like, what is a catch? But this was ruled a catch on the field. I don't think there was enough evidence to overturn the call, honestly. But whatever. But he should have had 100, like almost 100 yards on a touchdown. So just watch JSN. He's available in one league. I put in a waiver claim for him. I would just watch him over the next, couple weeks. Moving on to Sunday. Colts and the Titans. And Nick knows just how much I love and adore these 2 teams from a football standpoint.
Well, I know you don't adore them, but they had one of the best football games in the Sunday window, which shocked. I think that was shocking.
They did. They did.
Yeah, it was fun. Listen, I think Derrick Henry is coming back into his element. I read the stat last week. I don't remember it off the top of my head, but post-Thanksgiving, Derrick Henry
averages 5 yards per carry. That's the only thing I remember.
And he averages close to, if not above, 2 touchdowns per game. Well, he hit that mark in this game. Unfortunately, he left early with what could have been a concussion. But he's really coming into his own, and he's really heating up at the right time for your fantasy team. As much as it might have felt like a struggle for Derrick Henry this year, because he has had some very low lows, he's still sitting at the RB7. He's about 1 touchdown away from being a top 5 running back for fantasy football. So for me personally, I think Derrick Henry rest away is going to be phenomenal, and I really do hope that people listen to me when I said take him, because he's going to get the Texans to ice in your fantasy playoffs.
Okay. Michael Pittman's been awesome. I've been saying it for a couple of weeks now. Nobody's really talking about him, but 11 receptions, 105, and a touchdown. That's like a 30-point fantasy day. He's been awesome. People love talking. People
11 on the year.
People love talking about Josh Downs, but like these are the Colts receivers just this week. 3 receptions for 100 and a tutty is Alec Pierce. Kalen Granson at 3 receptions for 72 yards, and then there's Josh Downs 3 for 14. I don't know why people are so obsessed with Josh Downs, even though he's a rookie receiver, but like he's closer to Quentin Johnston than like JSN or Addison to me. I don't know. Or Tank Dell. Like he's closer to the bottom half than the front half to me.
I agree.
And as for the running back, like Kyron Williams, I'm sorry, not Kyron Williams. Zach Moss, we're all over him, and he only had 51 rushing yards. So I know that Tennessee front is a little stout, but just noting it.
Yep.
All right, Nick, here's our game of the week. Chargers 6, Patriots 0.
Shootout.
Chargers got a win.
Yeah, they got a big win.
They got a big win. Yeah, it's a big
shutout when their defense looks elite.
Yeah, defense does look elite. Maybe that maybe Herbert's the problem then, if their defense can hold teams to 0 points.
Maybe.
Do you have a fantasy takeaway from this one? Because I really don't. Like everybody stunk. I mean, I guess my fantasy takeaway is that you could play defenses against the Patriots offense, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's definitely
But like,
that's a great take.
yeah, but I mean, Keenan Allen didn't have a good game. I know he's a bit banged up. Oh, here's Quentin Johnston, 5 receptions for 52 yards. This is his best game of the season. There we go. Love that for my dynasty squad.
Quentin Johnston with 190 receiving yards this season.
Yeah, I love that for my dynasty squad. I don't have any other fantasy football takeaways.
And a big drop from Johnston, by the way.
I guess I forgot to read injury news for the last 2 games. Sorry about that. Going back to the Titans game, Derrick Henry exited Sunday's game with a concussion. I believe Monday, Vrabel said that he wasn't even in concussion protocol, so I'm not worried about that. Jonathan Taylor is still out with his thumb injury. I'm not sure he even plays in your fantasy playoffs. We'll see. And as for this Patriots game, Ramondre Stevenson exited the game with a high ankle sprain. I believe he's going to miss some time, probably 3 to 4 weeks, which probably means your fantasy playoffs. Maybe he returns for the championship, but I don't know. If by week championship's 17? If by week 17 the Patriots are out of it, I don't think they put him back on the field. So I don't think you could drop him just yet. But he's probably not.
Hope you have an IR spot.
Yeah, he's probably not playing for you again this season.
I agree with everything you said there.
He's starting to heat up too.
Yeah, he was starting to get hot. It sucks. I lost the league a game this week by 0.42 points, where I had Tank Dell and Ramondre Stevenson get hurt in the game. If I won, I would have clinched a playoff spot. Now I need a win and in game and probably the most competitive fantasy league standing wise that I've seen. From the 2 seed all the way down to the 11, I think everybody is still technically in playoff contention, with this week determining who makes it and who doesn't, which is absolutely insane. But yeah, I mean, listen, it is what it is. I think that the Chargers are going to I don't think their skill positions are very good. I think Keenan Allen has definitely been the bright spot of this team. He's the wide receiver 2 on the year. Great call by Nick before the year. And then I think Austin Eckler, I said it last year too, where he's putting up these touchdowns, which are massive outliers, but he's an awful runner and he's catching a lot of check down passes. Like, I don't think Austin Eckler is sustainable. I think they're going to pivot at running back. It's why they did not want to give him the big contract. And we'll see where it goes after this year, but I don't think Austin Eckler is going to be very fantasy relevant moving forward and for the future seasons.
Austin Eckler's the running back 26. Now, he did miss 3 weeks, had his bye, but even his average is only 14, per game. So if I do this by average, he is looking at he's looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. You're looking at 17. And the thing is, maybe my Eckler take was a year too early, but before last season, I'd said on the show, hey, I'm kind of anti-Austin Eckler early in drafts. Then he went out and had a top 3 running back season. So maybe I was a little bit early on that take, but from Rito, they use Zach as scapegoats, bash him to the media overall, just to destroy the kid. I could see why Zach never wants to be an NFL field again. I think he still wants to play football, but not for the NFL. This is a fantasy show, and I don't have much to say about Zach Wilson except he's bad. He's very bad.
I would say my opinion on Zach has been consistent. I don't think he's very talented, but I also don't think the Jets have given him a fair opportunity to succeed.
I think he had a fair shot this year. Defense was really good. Offense might not be the best in the league, but options around him. I think he had a shot.
I agree. I don't think that Zach Wilson deserves another snap as a New York Jet. I know they want to give him the start back, and I do think he's the best quarterback in that room, but he said that it was more so fear of getting injured behind the offensive line. That was really the conversation of him not wanting to start again for the Jets, because he knows he's not getting a contract. He knows he's not going to be on this roster next year. So why would he risk an injury, which risks him getting paid and getting a future job? When I think he'd be a phenomenal backup to Matthew Stafford. I think that's a good veteran that could develop him a little bit. And we don't want to harp too much on this because it is a fantasy show, but if he gets back in that starting lineup for the Jets, I still don't think that there's much of an upgrade for the fantasy relevant players. I don't think Brees gets a big bump. I don't think Garrett Wilson gets a big bump. I think they're equally as viable with or without him on the field.
I think my only counterpoint to that is that if you're a team looking at a backup quarterback, next year. Like, look at some of these backups. They're guys that players want to play for. A guy like Jameis or a guy like Fitzpatrick, they were backups that players would want to play for if they come in. Josh Dobbs.
Sure.
If you see Zach Wilson's comments about this, about not wanting to get hurt and go up there with his teammates, injuries can happen at any time. I know the line isn't great, but injuries can happen at any time. Russell Wilson trotted out there with the worst offensive line in the league for years, and Geno's been sacked a lot as well. Like, I'm just saying that I feel like it's a really bad cloud to have over you. I don't want to go out there because I'm scared of being hurt. This is a game where you get hurt in. I'm a big pro wrestling fan. Nick's also a wrestling fan, casually a bit. And if Roman Reigns said, I don't want to wrestle because I don't want to get hurt, it's like, dude, you're the champion.
You lost your job.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
All right. Lions at the Saints. Derek Carr exited with a concussion, and he also has shoulder and back injuries. It sounds like we really need Jameis in here for the rest of the season. So I'm not really sure what the Saints are thinking, but I think we need my man J-Bo in there. And I personally do hope that Jameis is in there. He's a lot of fun. Nick, your big takeaway from this game?
I feel like Derek Carr's getting rocked this year. I just feel like there's so many times where I've seen Derek Carr just in pain and agony from getting wailed on.
I wonder if he retires.
I don't think so.
But I don't know.
But I saw a very good take about the Saints a few weeks ago. They're getting their revenge. They're getting their revenge this year because they didn't follow what every team does. They had a chance to peak with Drew Brees. They went all in on winning a championship, and they never did it. And usually after that, you have to full rebuild. And they've kind of just tried to avoid rebuilding by paying a bunch of veteran players, trying to keep them consistent. And now they're starting to show their age, and they're going to have a real crash from hell in the next coming weeks. You can see it. The offensive line looks super banged up and super hurt. You can see the defense looks very susceptible, not as good as they once did. Now there's a very good bounce back shot here against the Carolina Panthers. Although I would recommend losing that game because you do not want to see Caleb Williams in your division for the next decade or so. But
who would Caleb go to?
I'm sorry, in the conference. So the Chicago Bears. So personally, I don't think the Saints are very good. I think that the next few weeks are going to be rough for them. I think Jameis could be a little refreshing in the lineup for a guy like Olave, who has been very solid, but not as high ceiling as we thought he would be.
He's wide receiver 16, and I think he was probably drafted at wide receiver 10 or something.
Yeah.
So maybe didn't perform to his ADP. But I mean, I don't think he's had a bad season.
No, he hasn't had a bad season, but he has
okay.
Stealing. He has only had one game over 20 points this year.
He's almost like he's been okay. He's had a bunch of games over.
I'm not digging on Olave. I'm just saying that the connection hasn't been.
He's had a bunch of games over 14, 15 points.
He was drafted at the wide receiver 10-ish, expected to have games where he'd be 25, 30 and win you a week.
Yeah,
he's not had one of those all year.
I think he has the same issue with Garrett Wilson, where there's a lot of a quarterback play issue. He could be good for 6-7 receptions for 80, 90 yards, but that's really it. It's not a knock on Olave. That's
agreed.
Not enough end zone looks per se.
He is outperforming Devontae Adams, though, so I'll give him that.
And Nick loves that take a lot. All right, Falcons at the Jets. This game is kind of gross, as kind of expected. Man, I'm sorry for the bad audio, guys, but I was trying to find Garrett Wilson's name. He went 3 for 50, and he had a good game last week. Breece Hall had a terrible game. Breece Hall must have had 5 fantasy points.
He played awfully.
Bijan Robinson didn't really have a good game. He might have had 8 points. I don't know. I don't have a fantasy takeaway from this one. This is exactly how I expected. Jets defense is really good, and the offense is really bad, and that's what happens when you have a crappy game like this.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would really say is you're watching the Jets once again limit a lot of top-tier fantasy players. And I know Pitts is inconsistent.
Do you think Breece is 100%?
Healthy?
Yeah.
Yes, I think the Jets' offensive line is the worst in football. And I think Saleh made a very good point about this, which he should not have said to the media publicly, which I will fault him for. But he said Brees is trying to get a home run every time he gets the ball, and he needs to learn to just get the 3, 4, 5 yard carry. And that's a lot of the reason why they brought Dalvin Cook in. So Dalvin's not happy with his role because he's not getting 20 touches a game, which is what he needs to be efficient. And on the flip side, Brees Hall wants to go get a 50-yard touchdown like Tony Pollard last year. So the hope was to use him like Zeke and Pollard, and the reality is Brees is not good enough to consistently pick up 4 yards. He does not want to get hit and hurt. And on the other side, you have Dalvin Cook, who kind of sucks at this point. But my only takeaway is really, and we've been saying this for weeks, everybody's been on this for weeks in all fantasy shows, the Jets defense is a very scary matchup. They have a much easier schedule moving forward. I believe they play the Texans this week, I want to say. So a guy like Stroud, I'd be a little bit nervous for. Collins, definitely nervous for. Noah Brown is going to see DJ Reader Sauce for half the game. Like, that's not a fun matchup. So yeah,
This is going to be another Falcons game. The Texans will win by like 3 points.
Yep.
All right, Cardinals at the Steelers. It's a game that never ended, it seemed like.
Nope.
Marquise Brown left Sunday's game with his heel injuries because they're still bothering him. Kenny Pickett had an ankle injury. I think it was on like a 4th and 1 or something like that. He's expected to miss extended time. I think it's a high ankle sprain. So it looks like Mitch Trubisky is going to start this week and maybe for like the rest of the season. And the season's only like 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 5 more weeks.
Yeah.
So, yeah. What's your fantasy takeaway from this one?
I mean, we know we warned everybody on Sunday's show. Do not expect the Steelers defense that you saw in their 1-game revenge as the coach was fired to bounce back and be explosive. Not to call out any of the listeners, but a lot of people thought, 400 yards they were going to get again. They were going to be explosive. The Cardinals defense is awful. The Cardinals defense is awful, and they held Pittsburgh to 10 points. This is the same exact Steelers offense that struggles to move the ball down the field. You cannot comfortably start anybody expecting touchdowns because they're not going to come. It's not going to be successful. And Mitch Trubisky is not a better quarterback than Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett's not a great quarterback either, but anytime you pivot to a backup and have to pivot to a backup, especially now because they have a short week going up against New England, I do not want Mitch Trubisky and that offense going up against Belichick's mind. Like, that's not what I want. I do think Pittsburgh wins the game, but you cannot expect that offense to explode like they did 2 weeks ago. I expect them to be a lot more like this week. I know it's a fantasy show and we got to watch football. I am probably not going to tune into that Thursday night game. I'll be blatantly honest with that. I do not.
We'll see what I'm doing. We'll see.
Yeah.
I have 2 TVs for a reason. My only fantasy takeaway is that James Conner finally found the end zone twice and 100 rushing yards, both with Kyler Murray at quarterback. So good for him. He's not dead in the water. Next game, Panthers at the Bucks. I had Bucks in Survivor. I picked them over the Jags. Good call by yours truly. I had to scroll down to find the game because ESPN messed up the order, which is annoying. Okay, no injuries in this one. Bucks won 21-18 against a competitive game. We talked about Chuba Hubbard on the Sunday morning show. He had 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. I'm not sure how many leagues he's owned in, but wonder if he's worth a sneaky pickup.
He could be. He could potentially be.
Jonathan Mingo may be as well. 6 receptions, 69 yards, maybe lapping Adam Thielen now. Might be a guy for keeper dynasty leagues just to kind of keep your eye on. Maybe.
Yeah. I think the Panthers suck. I don't want any Panthers still. I don't care about
I can agree with that.
I don't care about Chuba's 2 touchdowns. They scored 18 points. That might be one of their top 5 games of the year. And they still lost by a field goal to Tampa Bay. I do not want any of them. My only takeaway is Mike Evans is the soul of this offense. Baker had 200 passing yards, 162 of them went to Mike Evans. Mike Evans over the last 4 weeks, 10 targets, 12 targets, 9 targets, 12 targets. Over the span, 5 touchdowns over the course of the season, 1,000 yards. He only has 2 games under 15 or under 12 fantasy points this year, and both of them he left early with injury. So we're looking at a monster season from a veteran receiver. He has been a beast. Again, I have one concern for him, and that is he has to play Marshawn Lattimore in your fantasy championship. And we know that historically, Marshawn Lattimore has been good against him, and that it's not been smooth sailing, to say the least, for him finishing those games against New Orleans. So hopefully he does not screw people over in the championship, but expect him to be very, very consistent, the heart and soul, the touchdown grabber for at least the next 3 more weeks, and comfortably be happy that you drafted him in the 6th round.
Dolphins at the Commanders. This was a walloping. I'm glad I played the Dolphins defense. I don't know if we have a take on the Commanders defense at this point. I mean, offense, but man, Curtis Samuel is the leading receiver, 4 for 65. Terry McLaurin had a goose egg. Jahan Dotson has not performed to expectations. Brian Robinson had the most rushing yards, but Gibson actually out carried him. So, I mean, I guess if I take on the Commanders offense, they still stink. And maybe Sam Howell's yardage and performance is an outlier earlier in the season, but they still kind of stink.
Yeah, I think that's fair. On the Dolphin side of the ball, I'm going to keep hammering this home because I don't want to say that this is going to happen because I have so much fantasy on the line on this take. I think the Dolphins, these next few weeks, are going to be extremely tough for them for fantasy. Tennessee, they're going to get on Monday. Very good opportunity. All your guys should explode and probably pull you off a Monday Night Miracle to get you into your playoffs. After that, the stretch is the Jets defense, who we already talked about. The Dallas Cowboys, who, yes, are up and down, but have been one of the best teams against the wide receiver position. I expect Tyreek to have no problem. I think Jalen Waddle is going to have concerning weeks. And in the championship, they're going to get Baltimore Ravens. Those 3 teams are 3 of the 5 best teams against fantasy wide receivers. So, unfortunately for you, you're going to have the biggest test of, is this Miami team for real or not for real in the last 3-4 weeks of the season. And then in week 18, I believe they play Buffalo. So Miami's going to go through an absolute gauntlet of defenses to make the playoffs, win the division, and then go into the playoffs. It's going to be brutal. It is going to be a brutal schedule. For me personally, I said this a few weeks ago. I will stand on this mountain. I'll die on it if I'm wrong. I think Tua, you have to pivot from at quarterback for your fantasy playoffs.
He may not be able to at this point.
You might not be able to. Well, if Jordan Love is available, I think Jordan Love is a play over him for the rest of the season. It might be tough to say, but I want to just read off.
Gino just had 300 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Let me just read off the Tua stats real quick. Tua is the QB 11.
Yep.
Since in the last 5 games ago, he scored 23, which was very good. Then for your quarterback position, this is not elite numbers. 12.5, 18.5, 9.8, 19.2. You're seeing the up and down from Tua a little too much for fantasy production. And we have seen both of these running backs now have significantly efficient games. I think there's going to be one of these 3 games, maybe 2 of them, where Tua does not perform where you need him to. And it could be very bad and ruin your fantasy championship. For me, I'm comfortable pivoting off of him if you can. But of course, it has to be the right matchup, the right player. I think Jordan Love is the guy. Over the last 4 weeks, 18.7, 21, 26, 24. He's now sitting at the QB 9 on the course of the year, above Lamar, Tua, Goff, Lawrence, and Russell Wilson. I think Joshua Dobbs, I don't want to play him over Tua, but he has one of the easiest playoff schedules for a quarterback. And he's going to get Justin Jefferson back. This is going to be the best offense he's had all year, and he's currently sitting at the QB 15.
So Dobbs, you may have a case for, but let's look at Love next 3 weeks compared to Tua.
Sure.
Tua at home against your Jets or Love at home against the Bucs?
I'd rather play Jordan Love in that matchup.
I think your Jets cap is talking to you.
I don't think so, because Bryce Young, he didn't cook the secondary, but he played one of his best games against the secondary with those awful pieces. I think that you're underrating Jordan Love. I mean, the Chiefs' defense has been one of the best in football, and they routed them from the first.
That was impressive. The next game, Dolphins at home against the Cowboys. Jordan Love on the road against the Panthers. I like that one more than that first week.
I agree, although I do think that's a Tyreek Hill game. I don't think Bland is covering him at all.
I don't think the Cowboys defense is as good as people say they are. My Seahawks just almost outshot them in a shootout. And then you have week 17. You have the Dolphins at Baltimore, or you have Jordan Love and the Packers at the Vikings.
I like Jordan Love in that matchup.
It's a better matchup, but it's a really tough decision to make. So I lost the fantasy championship in our league, the best team that I personally have seen ever assembled in a competitive, 10, 12 man league. I think we were 10 at the time. And I lost because I played Russell Wilson and DK Metcalf against the Rams. I played my guys, and I could have played Justin Herbert, who was a rookie at the time and was playing very well over Russell Wilson, and I didn't. So it's a very tough decision to make. Then I feel like it's really tough for you to, let's say Jordan Love puts up a stinker, and let's look at your team, Nick, for an example. In our league, most points, going to be the 2 seed probably. Let's say you lose in a divisional round because you played Jordan Love. I think you'd be very pissed at yourself. I think you would just say to yourself, like, how can I do that?
Yeah, listen,
it's a very tough decision. It's really
that's
tough.
Usually who wins the fantasy championship is who makes those tough decisions. Just on one more opinion on Jordan Love, his last 4 games are 18.7, which was up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Then you have 20.9 against the Chargers. You have 26 against Detroit, and then you have 24 against Kansas City. So the last 4 games, he's averaging over 20 fantasy points per game. That 4-week stretch, that over 20 points per game, Tua has only outscored that. He's averaging 22 over the last 4, Jordan Love. Tua's only outscored that 3 times this season, has not outscored it since week 8. So there is definitely, I think Tua is going to lose some people championships. I'm just going to leave it at that.
Interesting. I'm not against it. Maybe I need to take off my anti-Jordan Love glasses at this point.
That's all right.
All right. Broncos at the Texans. Tank Dell's diagnosed with a fractured fibula that sucks big time. Easily the steal of the year. Can't say anything.
I mean, I don't know. Nico Collins might be the steal of the year.
Well, why do you say that?
Because he's had almost just as good of a fantasy season, and he's going to play the rest of the year out.
Tank's at wide receiver 19.
Nico's at wide receiver 12.
Okay. Yeah. Yep. I'll agree to that one. I did not see him there. Okay, cool.
That's right.
What's your fantasy takeaway from this one?
I mean, listen, the Denver defense has been significantly better over the past few weeks, and CJ Stroud had no problem kind of dicing them up for most of the game. I know the scoreboard didn't show it with 22 points, but this Denver defense has not allowed 22 points very often. Nico Collins played phenomenal. The run game for this team is absolutely abysmal. They're going to have to figure that out in the offseason, but I think now that the Jaguars lost, the Texans and the Colts have a real shot at winning this division. They're only half a game or 1 game behind. The Texans split with them this year. I think the Colts still have 1 more game against them. So very interesting for football, but for your fantasy football, I mean, CJ Stroud has been elite. I don't want to play him against the Jets, but I think for the rest of the season, he's almost going to have to be locked into your lineup.
I think you could still play him against the Jets. I mean, he's just been that good. I think you're overrating the Jets defense.
I've watched Mahomes. I've watched Tua. I've watched Josh Allen. I've watched all of them put up bad, and Jalen Hurts all put up.
Josh Allen didn't the last time he played them.
The last time, but the first time. I mean, listen.
This is a different Jets team than week 3. I think the defense has given up. I think that those players.
What do you mean? You literally just talked about how they demolished another team 2 minutes ago.
Who?
You just talked about how they absolutely destroyed the Atlanta Falcons.
Oh, the Falcons aren't a real offense.
Oh, stop that.
They're a terrible offense.
It's ridiculous. All right.
No. Desmond Ridder is a terrible quarterback. You can't tell me that Desmond Ridder is on the same stratosphere as CJ Stroud.
Obviously not. But the Jets are embarrassing quarterbacks, as they've said, as they've claimed from one coach, Bob Saleh.
I think coming out after the bye, this is a different Jets team. I think the defense is still good. I'm not scared of them good anymore. I'm
All right,
I will
see
play
this
my
week.
top quarterbacks against them.
Okay, we'll see.
I mean, Josh Allen lit them up. Like Josh was great, and Josh is historically not
Josh
good
is the
against
QB1 on fantasy on the year. Like,
but he's
I don't
also
know
historically
what
bad
to-
against the Jets.
I'm sorry.
He's historically bad against the Jets, Josh Allen.
Of course, and he had
That's
one
true.
good game. Again, like I said before, everybody gets the 1 week lull after they fire their offensive coordinator or head coach, and that's exactly what happened. They fired the OC, and then they played the New York Jets, and they got
Okay.
their.
Okay. I mean, I just want to look at the Jets like next. Like, I know they have the Dolphins one of these weeks. They have the Texans, Dolphins. They have such an easy schedule.
Yeah, if
They
only
have such
Rodgers
an easy
came back.
schedule. I mean, they have such an easy schedule. Like, I would still play Stroud against the Jets. I'd probably still play Tua against the Jets, but then like Sam Howell, whoever's playing quarterback for the Browns and the Patriots, like I
You're
wish
playing them anyway.
I wish I could solidify my point against you because I wish they had like a Mahomes or a Hurts or
Well, you
even-
said CJ Stroud's a top 5, top 10 quarterback, so we'll see it this week. You said
Yeah, I mean,
Tua and this
sure.
offense should be fine, so we'll see.
Yeah,
It this
we'll see the next 2 weeks. I wish they had another one, but we'll see these 2 weeks. I wish they had like one more really big gun to face. Because they did play really well against guys like Mahomes and Hurts. I think the Hurts game is the most impressive game that I've seen that defense play.
Tua also did only score 9.8 last week against them, but go on. We'll see what happens.
But how much of the offense? But this is where fantasy in real life, where we're kind of mending. You're right. Maybe from a quarterback perspective, yes.
Yeah.
But Stroud's been awesome. And where's Stroud right now? He is quarterback 5. Yeah. I mean, but then again, Sam Howell's quarterback 4, so it kind of like deflates the take. I'm like, you don't bench my quarterback. But I think Stroud's been great. So anyway. We'll move on. Browns at the Rams. This was a slaughtering. Joe Flacco got slaughtered, 36-19. Amari Cooper had a concussion. He'll need to clear protocol before this next upcoming game. Puka was awesome. Puka had 4 for 105 and a tutty. Cooper Kupp was 6 for 39 and a tutty. Kyron Williams was awesome again, 88 and a tutty. All the Browns players were just not playable this week, kind of, except for Elijah Moore, maybe, but even him only had 12 points.
I think Jerome Ford had a fine day too because he found the end zone early on. But
he had a receiving touchdown. He had a receiving touchdown, 30 receiving yards, and 3 receptions. So he squeaked out like a 13, 15 point fantasy performance.
Yeah, exactly.
Touchdown saved them.
Yep. Anyways, for fantasy, the Rams are much better than anybody thought they were going to be. This offense looks really good. But Stafford has still not been good enough to be a fantasy relevant quarterback, in my opinion. He's not putting up the numbers, but his wide receivers are. Cooper Kupp finally bounces back a little bit with a touchdown in this game. Puka Nacua is dominating the rookie receivers. I know Tank Dell was in that conversation for a few weeks, but Puka is clearly the real deal. I'm very curious to see what this team does next year because they're clearly not a Super Bowl caliber team, but they're also like competing with teams they should not be competing with. They have a ton of veterans on that team. I don't know if they're going to blow it up.
I think they have a 2-year window.
Yeah.
I think they remind me of like that Cardinals team of like 2009 where Kurt Warner, where they just put some pieces together, they can make like one final run. But like Stafford's definitely like on his way out. Cooper Kupp's 31, I think, or 30.
Yeah.
Kyron's great. Puka's great. The line had to get revamped. Coach is awesome. Aaron Donald's still great, but he's on his last legs too, kind of. So I think they have a year or two to add some players, draft some players, whatever they could do. But they're not in the division to kind of do stuff like this either.
I totally agree because they're not going to compete with San Francisco. Arizona is going to land Marvin Harrison, and or they're going to trade Kyler, get a boatload of picks and a new quarterback. Like this is not the division to do it in, but we'll see what happens.
San Francisco 49ers at the Eagles. This score is ridiculous, 42-19. My big take was at Brock Purdy, 300 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. Quarterback 7 on the year in fantasy. He's been awesome. And he's been awesome with the best offense in the league, best offensive line in the league, best defense in the league. Just stating that for the masses, but he has been awesome for fantasy, and they're not going to be behind in a lot of games. Yeah, I mean, he's not on waivers, so like I can't tell you to pick him up, but I think I don't know where he gets drafted next year. I don't know. It's really interesting because he's not flashy.
I don't think he's going to get drafted next year. I think he's going to go in the same range, which is, backup quarterback.
But that's so absurd because his offense isn't going to change.
Think about the quarterbacks. Here's what it was this year, right?
Yep.
Mahomes, Hurts, Allen are going to be the top three. Pretty much.
Yes.
After that, it went to Burrow and Lamar. Then it went Herbert, Tua, Trevor Lawrence.
Yep.
Justin Fields.
Yep.
After that, now we're going to have CJ Stroud, Dak Prescott, and Brock Purdy.
Well, Stroud's going to be in the Justin Fields role of last year.
Sure. And then, then we're going to be talking, he's going to be in the lump sum of Jared Goff, Brock Purdy. I'm not going to put Sam Howell in there. I would put Jordan Love in that conversation. Kirk Cousins was there last year. Aaron Rodgers is going to be going in that QB 13 to 18 range. He's not, it sucks because he's really good, but he's not going to be fantasy drafted relevant, but he could still be a top 5 quarterback any given week.
Yeah. Eagles receivers also really good here. AJ Brown, 8 for 114. Devontae Smith, 9 for 96 and a tutty. Deebo Samuel basically called the Philly secondary trash, showed up there with like special sneakers or glasses or something, then had 4 receptions for 116, 2 tutties. But again, with the San Francisco offense, only 2 or 3 guys are going to play really well. I mean, McCaffrey had his 93 yards and a touchdown. But then you look at Kittle had 4 for 68. That's 10 points. That's fine, I guess. Brandon Ayuk saved his day with a tutty, 5 for 46 and a tutty. It's a 16-point game. The run game wasn't there for Philly, and Jalen Hurts got banged up and did not have a good game. So if you have another one, you could throw it in there. But mine was Brock Purdy.
2 real quick. Eagles are frauds. Been on this. I think they're last year's Minnesota Vikings. I've been saying it. I'm sticking with it. I think they're a second-round exit in the playoffs. And then on my number 2, Christian McCaffrey is so ridiculously good at running back, and I don't think it's getting talked about enough. Christian McCaffrey right now in full PPR has 295 points. He's the RB1 by a mile. The next best is Raheem Mostert, who does not feel like the RB2 on the year at 214 scored. After the gap between Christian McCaffrey and Raheem Mostert from the RB1 to the RB2 is the same as Raheem Mostert, the RB2, to Austin Eckler at the RB26 on the season. It is absolutely absurd. He is averaging over 1 more touchdown per game than Raheem Mostert, and Raheem Mostert leads the league in touchdowns. Christian McCaffrey, only 2 games this year under 20 points, no games under 13. 13.8 was his bust week on the year. He has been going absolutely nuts, and next season, we're still going to argue that he should not be the RB1 drafted in fantasy because we're concerned about injuries with him. But he is now going to have shown, if he stays healthy the rest of the year, 1 full healthy year with a San Fran team that always gets hurt, and an extra half a season last year where he did not, or another full season last year where he did not get hurt between Carolina and here. So he should be the 101 next year. But I know for a fact when I'm at that draft board, I'm taking Justin Jefferson still over him.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is that this is why so many people go 0 running back, because all those other running backs disappointed. And this is why 0 running back has now become like a popular, strategy to use.
Yeah.
All right. Sunday Night Football, Chiefs at the Packers. Did not expect this game to go the way it did. I think we already kind of spoke enough about Jordan Love. So that was your take. Yeah. That's your take. Yeah. I guess my take is Christian Watson, 7 for 71, 2 tutties. He's starting to kind of light it up. There's no run game for the Packers, so maybe him and Romeo Doubs are kind of the core of this team. But I'm still not 100% sure as to who the favorite is. Other little notes here: Rashee Rice went 8 for 64. Maybe he's definitely the wide receiver 1 over there at this point. I don't know. And Isaiah Pacheco, 18, 110, and 1. It's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I talked enough about Jordan Love. I think he's a great quarterback the rest of the season. I think he's looked phenomenal the last 4 weeks. I think he's going to have a much brighter future in this league than we thought at the first half of the season.
All right. And lastly, Monday Night Football. Last night, the Bengals with Jake Browning at the Jaguars. It was competitive before Trevor Lawrence went out. And the thing is, on this ESPN doc, Trevor isn't even listed, but I do know it's a high ankle sprain. I think it's a high ankle sprain. I know it's an ankle injury. It's not Achilles, not ACL. So we could return this season if they make the playoffs, but I don't think he's going to return the regular season. Aside from that, I mean, Jamar Chase had an awesome game, 11, 149, a touchdown. I couldn't even tell you T. Higgins suited up. His stats definitely don't show it.
Nope. He sucks.
Interestingly, Christian Kirk went out early with an injury, but Calvin Ridley only went 4 for 26. Your leading receivers are Evan Ingram, 9 for 82 and a tutty, and Zay Jones, 5 for 78, no tutty. Joe Mixon was also really good. I think you probably want to talk about Mixon, so I'll let you.
No. I got somebody else I want to talk about.
Okay, well, Joe Mixon was 68 and 2 touchdowns. He also had 6 receptions for 49 yards. That I'm not a math guy, but that's like a 25-point fantasy game.
Yeah, I think he finished right at about 30 on the day, 29.7. My big takeaway is someone that did not play in this game and is the biggest fraud of them all, Joe Burrow. Jake Browning came into this offense, put up 32 out of 37, 350 passing yards. I don't know why it says 1 touchdown here. I thought it was more than that. But, because Mixon ran them in. But guess what? This guy came in immediately for Joe Burrow, was even more efficient than Burrow's been all year, put up more passing yards in any game than Burrow did all season, and looked absolutely phenomenal. I don't care what anybody wants to say. Joe Burrow is overrated as a quarterback. I'm going to leave it at
But last week, Jake Browning only put up 227, 1 tutty, 1 interception, and lost against the Steelers. So this game might be an outlier. That take only has value if Browning holds up over the next 4 weeks.
Joe Burrow is awful against his division. So the entire Bengals team is awful against their own division. It's against Mike Tomlin.
Now they have the Colts, Vikings, the Chiefs later on, the Browns, Steelers.
I don't think they're getting in the playoffs, but I think you're going to see Jake Browning prove that, even though he's not Joe Burrow, obviously, that he's a very viable backup quarterback, and that Joe Burrow has gotten way too much hype in his young career. But it also proves my point that someone like Justin Herbert could have been plugged into this offense and been significantly, if not just as good as Joe Burrow.
You know what point it proves to me? If you put quarterback A in a good situation, they could flourish.
Of course. So
I mean,
Joe Burrow.
I forget who the quarterback backup is for the Chiefs, but he led the Chiefs down 99 yards last year in a playoff game.
You're right.
He probably could have won them that game against this Jags team.
Maybe.
Quarterback A, who's a backup in a good. If Josh Dobbs is on your Jets, they're a playoff team.
Oh, 100%. That's
is Jake Browning, if he's on your Jets, are they a playoff team? I don't know.
I don't think so.
I don't know.
Maybe.
I'm just saying some of these backups, just saying. I think Jameis makes the Jets a playoff team.
Maybe.
I'm just saying you put a decent backup on with a good talent around him. I think there's a lot of teams. I mean, maybe not this year because the Chiefs don't look as stout. But if you put backups on these last 3 Chiefs teams, maybe not like a Zach backup or like a DeVito backup, but I think 15 backups or so.
Kobe Brissett.
He makes the playoffs with that Chiefs team.
Probably.
He might win the division as well.
Maybe that's a tough one.
I think it depends on.
Yeah.
So anyway, alrighty, guys, that is our show. Thank you for listening. Thank you for those that tuned in live. We appreciate you. If you watch the replay of the live on our YouTube, make sure to drop a like on this video. We'd appreciate that. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hit that little bell icon guy so you get notifications every single time we go live. Next time you hear from us will be 9 o'clock Eastern time this upcoming Sunday for our week 14 live show. Stardom, Sid'em, all our questions that we can answer for you guys. We'll have a lot of fun with that. That'll be on our YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. If you're listening on an audio streaming platform, make sure to subscribe. Give us a 5-star rating on iTunes or Spotify. We'd appreciate that greatly. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for asking your questions. And we'll talk to you guys on Sunday.